All right. Hello. This is the Vanity Hacks Content Committee's Full Stack Development Workshop Series. This is going to be a series of 4 workshops. And this first workshop, we're going to cover some of the fundamentals of web development. But before we get into that, it's really, really important that you guys have the proper tools to make sure that we can kind of hit the ground running with these workshops because we have a very, very limited amount of time together. So if you saw in the Discord, I provided you a link to a page that has you install all these different tools that you might that will definitely need over the course of these workshops. And I'll show you how to access those here, or you can just go in the Discord and it's in VH announcements. So you can go to our GitHub organization. GitHub is this really, really cool place where you can kind of share and have all your code all in one place. So you can go github.com/vh-mentorship. And if you go here, this will be the home base where we'll have all the code that you'll need, right? So if you go down here, you'll see assignment 0, workshop 1 setup. If you click it, you'll see this README file. A README file is basically just a bunch of text. And you'll see that there are 4 things that I need you guys to install before you continue with this workshop. The first is going to be VS Code. VS Code is really, really cool in that it can support all these different languages. It has a bunch of extensions, and it's great for web development because with web development, you're working with all these different languages. You know, C-line will only work for, C++ or C. PyCharm will only work over Python. But here, VS Code is this all-purpose IDE. It's the only one you'll need. I strongly, strongly recommend it. So definitely make sure that you have that installed. It's really, really easy to do. The second thing here is Node.js. So for JavaScript, our computer kind of needs to understand the JavaScript code that we're writing. And in order to do that, we need Node.js. And Node.js is the runtime environment for your computer. And it also comes with this thing called Node Package Manager, which will actually allow us to install packages or libraries that will make our code a lot more streamlined, a lot more simple. And will also allow us to, focus on what's important in terms of developing a website rather than focusing on all these different nitty gritties. And the third thing that we need is Git. Git is what is called a version control system, a VCS, if you've ever heard that. And it essentially allows you to save the progress of your code, as well as to be able to share it with other people, which is really, really important. Because let's say you're working on some sort of feature and you realize that you might not need it, or that it's impossible to implement, or you make a huge mistake. It's really, really simple to just revert back to some of the code that you might have saved before. And you'll also need GitHub. GitHub is where we are right now. It's, as I mentioned before, a really, really cool place for you to share all of your code with other people, as we will be doing here. So make sure that you have these 4 things installed before you continue with this video. All right, cool. Now that we have that out of the way, I can go back here and introduce this series as well as the content committee. So hello there. As you may have noticed already, I am not the entire content committee. It's just me, Kevin. But we actually forgot to record the first 15 minutes of the workshop. So it will be me talking for the first 15-ish minutes. And then we will actually move on to the recording of the live workshop. But you definitely will not miss anything. I will make sure to explain everything, and there's nothing to worry about here. So usually when we're actually in person in the auditorium, so definitely make sure you attend the second workshop. We will have TAs that will be mingled in the crowd. And whenever you have a question during the workshop, feel free to raise your hand and the TA will come and will assist you in any way possible. You will probably run into issues here. And since we don't have, TAs behind your backs while you're at home, there's the Discord VH Workshop questions channel. So definitely make sure that you, if you ever encounter any issues, if you have any questions, definitely do not hesitate to type in there or ask, your pod leader, ask me, ask any VH content member for help. and we'll definitely be able to assist you as soon as possible. Yeah. All right, so let's talk a bit about what this workshop series aims to do. So our goal here is to actually introduce you to this really, really cool field, very, very useful field of web development. Web development is building applications on the web, websites, as well as servers and the logic that comes behind it. So what we're actually going to be building is a to-do list application. So you'll be able to create tasks, edit tasks, change their priority, complete tasks, and our little twist that we're going to do is we're actually going to integrate it with the Brightspace API. So you'll actually be able to pull assignments off of Brightspace and immediately add them into your to-do list. So that's going to be a really, really cool twist that we're going to add to this project. And of course, this will be your project. We will try our best to kind of guide you, to introduce you to stuff, as well as inspire you to take this project and go wild with it, add whatever features you might want to it. And we will provide you various opportunities to do that, as well as various advice and guidance to help you accomplish that. And by the end, you'll have this to-do list with the Brightspace API that you'll be able to add to your resume, as well as knowledge about web development so that you can create your own projects and learn more about it in the future. All right, so before we talk about web development, we first got to talk about the web. So we got to talk about what is a website, what makes a website, as well as, what exactly does a browser do? So I think the best example that we can go through right now is one that we can all relate to. So let's take Vanderbilt Yes as an example. So if I go over here back to Chrome, I can go over to Vanderbilt Yes, so yes.vanderbilt.edu. You'll see that, I've been briefly replaced by Santa here. That was a Chrome extension workshop that we did a long time ago. And I was inspired by Nisala to keep the Santas here. So yeah, ignore it. So basically, whenever you make a request, right, whenever you hit enter on the URL, like google.com, like yes.vanderbilt.edu, what happens is you're making a request to a server somewhere in the world. And this server will contain a bunch of files, and it will send you these files for your browser to read, to interpret, and to show you this page. So in fact, I can show you the files themselves. So in Chrome, it's really, really easy to do. All you need to do is just right click on your page and say inspect. I strongly recommend that you use Chrome. It's definitely the most comprehensive in terms of developer tools. But that being said, you can still use something like Safari or Firefox. Things might look different for you. And to figure out how to inspect there, all you need to do is go on Google really quickly and say how to inspect element on Safari or how to inspect element on Firefox. And it'll be really, really easy to find. But it'll be a little different from what we do with Chrome. So I strongly recommend that you use Chrome. All right, so if I were to click inspect right here, right, this little window pops up. And essentially, there's a bunch of tabs up here. So this is HTML. We'll talk about this a lot more later. But you'll see that there's all these different tabs here. I have not touched all these tabs. I doubt very, very many people have touched all these tabs because you won't need all of them. But there are a couple of ones that I really, really want to point out. So here's the sources. As I mentioned before, you go to a server with a request and it sends you all these different files. So here you can actually see all the files that are being sent. So here's a bunch of CSS, which provides styling. Here's a bunch of JavaScript, which provides logic. And here's all these image assets that they actually send to you. So you can just, take a look at all these. There's that header right there. So basically you're being sent a ton of files, and what your browser does is it takes all these files and it takes all this code and logic and it uses that logic to kind of form this website. And you can see that in the network tab. If I were to make like a request, you'll see that this network tab gets populated really, really quickly with all these files that we've gotten from Vanderbilt's Yes server, wherever it is, hopefully in Nashville somewhere. Yeah. So there are three things that your browser mainly interprets. There's HTML, there's CSS, and there's JavaScript, right? So HTML provides you the structure of your website. So it's kind of a place for you to write all your text and specify what exactly the purpose of that text or that image is. So here, for example, this image would be an HTML file. This text here, we would need to specify that it's a button so that we can access all these different button behaviors. You know, this right here is a link, right? We need to specify that it's a link in our HTML file so that it fits all the link behaviors. Like if I click on it, it will take me to the building portal. All right. And I think a cool example of HTML is actually one of the first websites on the internet. So if you look up like World Wide Web, you'll see the actual original proposal for the World Wide Web back in the 1990s. And you'll see that this page is written entirely in HTML. There's a big header right here. There's a paragraph here. There's a link here. And it's really, really boring, really, really plain. You've definitely seen it before. Last updated in like August of 1992. So really, really old website. And this is what websites used to be, right? They used to literally just be a bunch of text with a bunch of links that would go to other websites. And that's entirely what the web was way back in the day. So obviously, you know, that's really boring, really plain. So that's kind of where CSS comes in, right? How do we style websites? How do we take the student landing and add this little bit of like margin here that makes it a little bit further to the right than this? Like, you know, like how do we make this all yellow? How do we make this a different color of yellow? How do we add a gray border around this? That kind of thing. So that is where, you know, CSS comes into play. It provides us styling. It lets us do cool things like animations. It lets us, you know, size our image. Since it's not here, I'm back. That kind of thing. And the last thing is JavaScript. So JavaScript will actually give you interactivity. It will give you logic to your website. So if I were to click applications here, for instance, this huge pop-up shows up, right? If I were to click show Buckley message, you know, this Buckley message would show up. So essentially, what JavaScript does is it allows you to add logic to your website. So, you know, like as soon as I click this, you know, this thing shows up, that kind of thing. And JavaScript, in terms of the browser, is very, very what we call event-driven. So, you know, it's constantly waiting for something to happen. So for instance, this button is constantly waiting for me to click on it. And as soon as I click on it, it triggers an event. And that event, which is called like on click, will have all the logic to kind of show this little window here. As soon as I close it, it closes it. So yeah, HTML provides you the structure, CSS provides you the styling, and finally JavaScript provides you the logic to make your website more interactive. All right, so let's go a little more in depth into HTML for layout. So a cool way to think of HTML is it's kind of like a newspaper, if you ever read one these days. So it's really, really plain. You have a huge header, you have a bunch of paragraphs, you'll have an image, and these are all different elements of your newspaper, right? So HTML works in the same way. And in order for our computer to understand what elements are, we use these things called tags to define elements. So a tag will consist of a less than sign, a greater than sign, and then the definition of whatever that element is. So here, for instance, we have a paragraph tag, right, denoted by that P. If you look on the documentation, just look up like HTML documentation, you'll see all these different types of tags. and we'll go more in depth into what these different tags are later. But tags have an open and a close. So you'll see here, this is an open tag. This entire thing is an open tag, and it's kind of like an open brace. If you were to ever use Java, right? It defines the start of our scope. And here is a end tag. I don't know why this is way bigger, but so this is an end tag, and it's denoted by this little slash right here, right? So this says basically this is the end of our definition of a paragraph. And then within it, we actually have the content of our paragraph. So here, I don't know what's happening here. Here we have hello, and that's actually the text that we use within our paragraph element. So yeah, we have our starting tag, we have our closing tag. And then another thing about tags is that we can actually have attributes within them. You can kind of think of them as functions with different features. As I mentioned before, you know, a button has a different behavior than a paragraph, and we need different attributes to kind of describe that button and provide the extra features that a paragraph would not be able to provide. So here we have a link. A link is defined by an A. Don't ask me why. I do not know. But here we have an attribute, right? So we have a traditional A tag, and then we give it an attribute, which is the actual link that we want. So here it would be href. That's what it's called. This would be a reference to somewhere on the internet. You can go to this link. You can see what is there if you really, really want. And then you can see that it's kind of enclosed in a string. So we got, you know, open quote, close quotes. And this is the value. So we have an attribute, we have a value. You can kind of think of them as function parameters in Java or Python. And then here's the actual content, you know, click here. So if you've ever seen like click here and then like an underline, what that is the link. And that link will go to whatever is in the href. So if you were to see this on the website and you were to click here, it will go to, you know, https vhl.inc/Aadi, fill this in, which Aadi did not evidently fill in. All right, cool. You know, obviously this theory is very, very boring and very, very impractical unless we bring it some sort of demonstration. So I'm going to go through the start of this demonstration, and then we're actually going to shift to the actual workshop video itself, and you'll actually be able to see the workshop as it happened live. Cool. So the first thing that you'll need to do is open up VS Code, which we just installed. So luckily for me, it's in the desktop, but it should be in like applications or wherever, just like any other application. So I'm opening VS Code, and you'll see yours might look a little bit different from mine. But essentially what we need to do is we need to create a new folder. You can create it wherever you want. I'm just going to create one in desktop. And this folder is going to contain all the files that we're going to have for this workshop. So I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to title it a workshop, sure. And then I'm going to drag it in here, and then VS Code will actually open it for you. But if you don't want it on your desktop, if you think that's really, really cluttered, you can create the folder somewhere, and you can go File, Open Folder, and then you can go grab that folder, right? And then you can just like click that folder and then click Open or whatnot. But I'm just going to drag it in for simplicity's sake. So yeah. Over here is going to be our files that we're going to have. And as you can see, our files are currently empty, right? Because we have an empty folder. So you can right click and you can say new file, or you can just click right here on this little button and create a new file. And this first file that we're going to create is index.html. Index is just good practice. It defines, you know, our main HTML file. And we need to say .html, right? Because this is an HTML file. This is going to only contain HTML code. And in order for our computer and our browser to understand that is HTML code, it's always going to look at whatever's past this dot. which is going to be the file type. So if I hit enter, we have our file and it's open, right? So HTML, as I mentioned before, it has start tags and it has end tags. And the funny thing is, in order to begin the scope of an HTML file, we actually need those start tags and end tags. So the first thing, the root of every HTML file is going to be an HTML tag. So what you're going to do is you're going to do a lesson sign, then you're going to say HTML, and then you're going to close it. And VS Code is really, really smart, and it'll automatically add it for you. If you don't see that happening, you'll just have to create this yourself. You can hit enter, and it automatically allows you to kind of create the children of it, right? So there's a couple things that an HTML file can have. The two main components of every HTML file is a header and a body, or a head and a body. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a head tag, right? And the head is actually going to be the place where you kind of specify certain things about your file. So actually, these are things like, let's say I want to import a CSS file, I want to import a styling file, or I want to import some JavaScript, or I want to, add this little icon to the side of this, to my tab, or I want to actually name the tab. All these things are done in the header. They're not things that are actually on the web page itself, and you'll never ever see anything in the header on the web page. So let me save this real quick. You can do Command S, you can go File, Save, but I strongly recommend you just do like Command or Control S, and it'll save the file. And then what I want you to do is I want you to right click on the HTML file, and I want you to say copy path. And this will copy the full path of wherever this file is on your computer. I want you to open Chrome, and then I want you to paste that file path and hit enter. And you'll see that we have this empty web page right here. If I were to inspect, you'll see, here's our code that we've written. So take a minute to do that. I strongly recommend that you follow along, so that it's good practice for you, as well as it kind of keeps you engaged and keeps you interactive and keeps you learning. Cool. So you'll see here that by default, the title of our page is just index.html. But what if I want to change that? Within the header, I can give it a title. So I can create a title tag, right? And then this title can be Aadi is cool, right? And then I need to save it, because remember that whenever you do whenever you write something in the file itself is not changed until you save it. So your browser is trying to access that file and is trying to convert it into a traditional web page, right? So it won't be able to see those changes unless you save it. So make sure that you save it, and then you'll need to refresh the page. So you can click here. You can do Command or Control R to refresh your page, and you'll see that our website is now titled Aadi is cool. Cool. So now what happens if we actually want to do stuff with our web page, right? What about all this white space here? Like, how do we create an actual web page? So that has to be done in the body. So you have your head, right? This is going to be the place where you declare all these different things about your web page. But after that, you need a body. So after the end of your head, right? After the closing tag of your head, where the definition of a head is over, we start the definition of our body. So we're going to create an opening tag and call it body. We're going to hit enter, and then we're going to write things about our body within it. And that is where I'm going to stop, and I'm going to give it to Aadi and Nisala.
All right, raise your hand if you still need help. All right, everyone good? Okay. Let's move along.
Right, so the next thing we do is we put up a body tag which will contain the actual body of our document.
So it's actually displayed.
Yeah. So we have written the body tag there, and now we're going to write our first heading. So
Right, so just like a newspaper, we're going to structure this kind of like a newspaper, right? So the idea is that at the top we have a first level heading. It's the biggest type of heading. And like I said before, that's an H1 tag. You can see that there's H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6. Those are different sizes of headings, right? And VS Code knows about all this. We're going to create H1. I'm going to call this, I don't know, it's my first website. It's pretty cool.
awesome.
And then I save, and then go over to the browser and refresh, and there it is, just shows up. All right, take a second to do that. I'll create an H1 tag, and then within its content, whatever you want. This can be anything you guys want it to be. Doesn't have to look like this at all.
Just save, go over to your browser, refresh, and you'll see your changes.
Yeah, so if I add an exclamation mark here and switch over and refresh, automatically shows up, just like that.
So H1 is just the size.
Yeah, so HTML has 6 headings, like 6 tags of headings. They go from H1 to H6.
Yeah.
H1 is the biggest, H6 is the smallest.
Yeah, we can actually show that, right? So we need a subheading. So let's make this one H3, smaller heading, right? And then, and then if I go over here and refresh, you'll see it's smaller, right? So they've kind of built those sizes right into the HTML, which sometimes does happen. So now that we have our headings, we want a paragraph, right? We want some actual text.
Yeah, we can get a paragraph going now.
Yeah, just a P tag.
And now we can write some text.
Save and refresh. There's our paragraph. It's shown right up. I'll give you guys a second to catch up here.
Okay, so just to recap, what have we done so far? We started our HTML document, wrote the head tag, gave our page a title, started the body, gave a big heading, gave a little smaller heading, and then started a paragraph and just wrote some text. It's all in front of us, so we know that we're doing it correctly just because we can see it.
Absolutely. Okay, so now what we're going to do is, what else does a newspaper need? Newspaper needs images, right? Needs some pictures, right? So we're going to create an image. So an image looks like this. So it's an image tag like this. Nope. Okay. And the thing is, an image doesn't really have content, right? It's just an image. So how do we tell it where it should look for the actual image? We use something called an attribute. So we tell it that we've got an image, and the place where the image is this attribute, and we tell it that it's at this source.
So this is similar to the example where we had the link href, vhlink article the same.
Yeah.
So we had an href attribute there that showed us the link to actually go to. And for an image, the idea is pretty similar, right? Like we just tell it, okay, our image is located here. It can be like a file on our system. You'll see soon that it can also just be like an image on the internet, and it will just show up.
Yeah. So let's find an image on the internet, and I want all of you guys to do this. I'm gonna look for pictures of Santa. That seems to be my brand now. Oh yeah, here's the Santa. Check it out. And so what I'm gonna do is oh, it's from Wikipedia. Okay. Yeah, give me that. I want it. Okay. Yes, I think this is good. Or wait, it might be this. Yeah, there we go. There we go. And now what I can do, now that I have that link, is I can paste it into here. So that is a really long link. The idea is, right, it's image, and then the attribute is source, equals, and then we give it that URL, and we paste it in. So now if I save this and refresh, nice. Yeah. There's something wonderful about this. Wait.
All you have to basically put an image in your HTML page so far. I mean, you don't have to use the exact same image we did, but let's just get an image in there.
All right. There's one thing that you guys should also know. If there's a tag without any content, right? Like for instance, this image tag, right? It has no content. if you have a tag without content, you can make it a self-closing tag, a tag that closes itself, that's the reason VS Code didn't autocomplete image. It's because it expects it to be a self-closing tag because it has no content. The way you do that is you just add a slash at the end of the opening tag. So this is just image, source, then the URL, and then a slash at the end, and then that's it. That's the whole tag. So self-closing tags are pretty common in HTML. That's something that you can do. This URL is so big, so I'm going to change it real quick, just that way people can actually see. All right. Anyone struggling? Raise your hand. We'll send someone over to help you. Raise your hand if you're having an issue. Anyone? Okay, cool. So let's move on. Let's do links.
Yeah. All right. So the next thing we can do now is also put a link in. We've talked about putting a link in so we can click on something and it takes you somewhere. So let's just put in one of those tags for effect.
Yeah. So A is the tag for a link. So we'll create an A tag, and we'll say that this goes to Google. Okay. Now, obviously, we need to tell the website where Google is, right? So that way we can go there, and we do that with an attribute. In this case, the attribute is called href, and so we're going to tell it the href is google.com. Kind of like this. Let me just try to expand this real quick. It's not liking me. Okay. So now if we refresh, we got a Google link here. It won't let me. Oh, never mind. It does. Okay, there we go. Wasn't letting me before.
Right. So you can make it to Google. You could make it go to Yes or something.
Yeah. If I click on this, there we go. I go to Google. It works.
As always, don't forget to save and reload.
Yep. Give you guys a second to get that in.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's one more issue. If you guys had a small picture, you guys are probably noticing, so I've got my picture here, right? And then the link is right next to it. What we really want, right, is we want the image, we want the link underneath it, right? So in order to do that, we can use one more self-closing tag called a page break, which is just BR. And BR inserts just a vertical space wherever you put it. So now if I save this and go over here, you'll see that now the link is showing up underneath the image instead of next to it, which is what we wanted. And you can stack these. So if I want a little bit of vertical space between my image and my link, I can do that, right? There's a bit more space.
Right. So I guess one interesting thing to know, right? Maybe some of you are maybe were thinking about this is why do we have like this magic tags? Like A is trying to link something, BR puts a new line. So A stands for anchor, BR stands for break, which is not something you'll ever need to know, but it's just good to know, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we'll give you guys one more minute to get caught up here. It's very important that you guys have this because, like I said, the next 2 or 3 live demos are all going to be building on this core that we've written right here, right? Because we're going to be styling it and we're going to be adding interactivity. So make sure that you guys have this set up so that way you guys can continue in the workshop as we go. So I'll give you guys 30 more seconds here to get started. If you have a problem, raise your hand. Someone will get to you.
Oh, I'm going to show a comment.
Oh, a comment?
Yeah, we can show
Yeah, we can show comments. Yeah. So if you want to do a comment, comments in HTML are very weird because remember, everything's tags, right? So they like to keep that going. So a comment in HTML it looks like this, which I know looks a little strange, not like anything you've probably ever seen before because the comment actually has a closing part, but that's how comments work in HTML. And this comment is interesting. It's unlike other languages because it can go some like in the middle of the language like this, right? Which is a little harder to do in some other languages. Okay. We're just showing you guys fun stuff now. You guys don't have to add this.
So HTML is super old and it has a lot of quirks. So one of the quirks is this tag called the marquee tag. And now Nisala will show us what exactly does the marquee tag do. Right. And now if you go and reload.
Yeah. This probably reminds you of a 2000s era website. That's because that's what it was made for.
No one uses it anymore. It's just so why this exists.
I'm keeping this actually. I really like this. I'm keeping this in my page.
Like just one thing from this workshop, and you ever like a professional, like you need to make a website or something.
Put the marquee tag. In fact, don't use paragraph, use marquee.
This was, I feel like this was before we had JavaScript to do this for us. So
Right, yeah.
Their idea of like interactivity.
All right. I hope you guys have all had enough time to get set up. We're going to move on to our next topic, CSS for styling.
So the analogy here is pretty good. It's basically like the idea that we just wrote words on a web page, right? This looks nothing like any other website that you use words to see, right? So what are we missing? But what all these styles is that we're missing any sort of like styling, colors, set like defined text, things like that. So the idea is like how do we go from pretty much like how to make a cupcake to an actual wedding cake, like a production-ready website, right? I mean, it's like if someone told me to bake something, then I probably would not be able to bake a wedding cake or something that big, like 3 tiers, like frosting going on, pink frosting, like a little man, like this white on top, like probably like spinning or something. I haven't really been to a wedding time, you know. But so let's just get to that and see how we can style this and make it look more visually aesthetic.
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to define styles, but CSS, again, is another one of these weird kind of quirky languages like HTML. Doesn't look like a programming language you've probably seen before. So CSS has a bunch of different attributes, right? Different things that you can do to style the website. For instance, color, or font size, right? Or font, right? All of those are different attributes, and those attributes, we can give those attributes different values. For instance, we can say the font size is 20 pixels. We can say the color is red, or we can set the background color, right? So all of these different things are attributes that are all defined by the CSS language, and then we can give them different values. CSS also, and this is a brief aside, we won't be using too much of this, but CSS also has some layout stuff. So for instance, you can take a container, you can say display flex, and then it'll display all of the content in a row, which is, it becomes very useful when you're trying to lay out a website, right? When you're trying to make it look nice and have all the elements show up where you want them to. So that's something that CSS can also help you. So styles can be applied directly onto an element using attributes, right? Just like the source attribute or the href attribute, we can use a style attribute and apply a style directly onto an element. So we can have a paragraph, we can say style equals color red. And then that paragraph will be red.
So we can we will do this as an example as well, but the way you can imagine it is it's like something like class 1, class 2, and then having the CSS that says, okay, for everything having like a class of class 1, the color should be red. What we could have done is something like P style and then color red.
Yep.
Exactly the syntax. Yeah, and we'll just show you in the demo, but there's 2 ways to apply CSS then. As we go so far. One of them is directly like putting it in the tag itself, and the other is by sort of like defining like general classes and stuff and then applying it to a bunch of those. Because this class 1 value, color red, it will apply to any element or tag that has class 1 in its class value. And class set is also an attribute, as we discussed, like href, src, things like that.
Yeah. So, right, like Aadi said, right, classes are associated with different blocks of CSS, and it just applies them on. So obviously that's a little bit abstract once again. So we're gonna do another demo. So pull up your VS Code in your browser again. We're gonna get right to it. Oh, I forgot how beautiful the site was. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start by applying styles directly. So what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna create 2 more paragraphs. Paragraph 2. If only I could spell. Ugh. And let's do paragraph 3. I just want to have a couple paragraphs. I'm going to put another one down here. Paragraph 4. Just so I have a little bit of variety, some different things I can style. There they all are. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to start by styling my first paragraph. Now this is very exciting, right? I'm very excited about my first website. So I'm going to go into H1. I'm going to go into, and I'm going to create an attribute called style. Right? And I'm going to say, okay, what is my style for this? And you guys can choose whatever you want. We're going to give it a color. We're going to have color, and you guys can give it whatever color you want. I'm going to make mine red. So I'm going to say color red. I'm going to save, refresh. Check it out. Heading is now red. That color looks a lot better on my computer, but as it goes. If we wanted, we could change that to green. Right? Save and reload. Now it's green. Right? Anything you want it to be.
VS Code sort of helps you with this because it will sort of like suggest you the colors as a type. So there's like a bunch of colors that is like pre-included. You can type the name.
Yeah.
There's like a bunch of ones that are like super specific. You wouldn't expect them to
Look
be
at all
there.
this stuff.
Yeah.
I want mine. Yeah, Peru. That's mildly problematic. Okay, so that's something you can do, right? Now, let's say that I wanted all, like this heading and all of this other stuff to also be red.
Or maybe we could modify all the paragraphs to be.
Right, yeah. What if I wanted, yeah, so actually, so what if I wanted all three of these things at the top first? We'll get to paragraphs in a second. Let's say I wanted all three of these, the H1, the H3, and the paragraph. What if I wanted all of them to be red, right? So one thing I could do, right, is I could copy this, I could paste it into all of them. I could do that, right? Now it works. It's a little ugly. So what we can do instead is we're going to introduce a new tag called the div tag. A div is really just a container. So a div, the purpose of a div is to hold other elements. It doesn't really do much else. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a div, tab it out like this, and then what we're going to do is we're going to assign the style to the div instead. So as you can see, we've got that heading 1, heading 3, and paragraph, and they're all within this div tag. And we've given the div tag a style. So now if I go over my website and refresh, it's all red. It's applied the style to all three of them, and I've only had to write it once.
Yeah. So the advantage of this is also, what if you want to change the color of these two to something else? We just need to modify this in one place so far, which is much better because we don't really know how many elements we could have in a div. So
right. Okay, we'll give all of you guys a minute to catch up here, because I know that's a couple new concepts. Okay, raise your hand if you have any questions, please. We want to make sure that you guys are getting this, that you guys get the help you need.
yeah. Once again to recap, we pretty much showed you how to add style to a specific tag, and then we showed you how to do it to multiple of them at once by using the new tag we introduced called div. And the way we work in CSS is pretty much you write the name of the thing you want to change. So like color, there's also like some font options and things. If you start typing it out, VS Code will suggest the stuff. So you can learn more from that than like the tags that I can list out.
Yeah. I can show you right now, actually. We can have multiple styles, right? So we can go like, on this, we go font size 20 pixels. We're just chaining them, semicolons between them. And now all of them are bigger, right? So that's absolutely something you can do as well.
Yeah. Feel free to play around. As many as you want. Add it to different stuff and just see how it changes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is all good and well, right? So now we know if we have a couple things next to each other, we can make them all red. That's great. But what if I've got this paragraph down here, right? What if I want to make that one red too, right? What if I want to make all of them red? Sure, I could copy paste, style color red, and let's say I wanted to make it font size 20 pixels too. Sure, I could copy that entire attribute and bring it down there. But then that's duplication, right? We've got that in multiple places, and that makes the code less easy to read. It makes it harder to change, right? Like what if we want both of them to be green later, right? Then I have to change it in multiple places. So now we get to classes, which will make this a lot easier. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a new CSS. We're going to create a CSS file, a separate place for our styles where we can define them.
So the idea is that if we're adding stuff manually to our HTML, then it's sort of like combining the layout parts and the style parts in one, but we can also sort of keep them separate. I think a good analogy here would be sort of like having fries and ketchup, right? Like you take fries and then if you take ketchup and then you like eat fries with ketchup, you don't really like, they don't like serve together. So this is why we're going to separate it out. We're going to make a new file.
Yeah, let's make it. Let's call it index.css. Okay. So actually, can I side by side these? Oh, I can. Okay, perfect. You guys don't have to do that, but just to show you guys. So what we want to do here, first of all, we want to tell the HTML file they can find where to find its CSS file. This is just like if you guys are in 2201, right? You include your .h file, tell your CPP file where it is, right? Or vice versa, right? It's the same thing.
Or try to like import or something, right? Like you import maps from map import this.
Yeah.
Same concept.
So how we do this is, we're going to use a link tag. So it's going to go in the head, because remember, this is not something that's displayed. So we're going to tell it link. We're going to give it a rel. So rel tells us what type of file we're linking. We're telling it that we're linking a style sheet. And then we're going to tell it where it is, which, make sure I'm doing that right, because I don't want to teach you guys the wrong thing. Use href again, and we tell it to go look in index.css.
Also, like, just so y'all know, we don't really remember this. No one really remembers this stuff, right? Like, we definitely Google it to remember, like, which
Yeah,
one of this.
we actually did, because yesterday we were running the workshop, and I forgot how to write this. So you know what I did? I went over to Google and I said, how to link, hey, look, there it is, how to link a style sheet into your HTML file. And check it out, it told us exactly what we just told you, just with a lot more YouTube videos. There it is, right? It's the exact same thing.
So the idea is, like, if you don't remember something, just search it, just like, pretty sure.
Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to write some stuff in our CSS file. So what we want is, let's give both of these the same class. Remember, a class is a way of grouping elements that have the same style. And an element can have multiple classes. So this class is, let's say it's red headers, right? So all of our red, let's call it red headings or something. All of our red headings will have this class. You can go down to the paragraph, you can give it red headings as well. You can give it the exact same attribute, class red headings. And now what we're going to do, once we have that, is we're going to open up our CSS file over here. And we're going to say dot. So dot represents a class. We're saying dot red headings. We're saying for every element that has the class red headings, we want to make the color red, and we want to make the font size 20 pixels. So for every element that has the attribute class equals red headings, make the color red, make the font size 20 pixels.
Wait, let's make it blue so we know that it changed for sure.
Good point. Red headings will be blue now, I guess.
This is
Oh well.
as it goes.
So now if we go over here, check it out, worked. Exact same thing should happen for you guys.
All right, so
Give you guys a minute.
yeah, try this out. Put in any color you want, any property you want, font size, color, make it super big, super small, up to you. But
All right, let's move on.
okay, let's go ahead. So now the thing that we want to talk about is something that people don't really talk about that much: accessibility. So the idea is that not everyone views or interacts with web pages the same way as like most people do, right? Like I look at a website, I'm like, okay, cool. But a lot of people who may be like visual aids or something use like a screen reader. So your website ideally should also work for like everyone, right? You should not be only accessible by people who would like have normal sight, do not use a screen reader, stuff like that. So there's a couple of ways in HTML that like will help you do that, like make sure your website is accessible for everyone. So a couple of concerns could be like, if someone is using a screen reader, can they like, will the text be like read out properly? What happens if they encounter an image or something? Like the person cannot see the image. How do they like know what your website is talking about? What if like someone is using like a mouse to navigate or something? You know, like I'm sure some of you have never tried it out. Like you have a form and you just hit tab or something to like get to the next field. A lot of people interact with websites this way. Like they go through different elements using like the tab button. Another thing to talk about is like the contrast. Like for example, like these slides are like black and white, so this is very visible. But often as you're like playing with different colors and stuff, then what happens is that like things really are not that well laid out for anyone, for people to see. So there's like standards and things for all of it, but the idea here is to like let you all be aware of this thing as you like go forward designing websites. To have this in the back of your mind to like design for accessibility, so your website is accessible for everyone. So I put this link in there. It goes to like the Mozilla web documents for accessibility. Nisala, you could like just click on it.
Yeah, sure.
Because they've done research into it and they can talk about it much more than I do. But the idea is just to like make you know that this is a thing to know.
Absolutely. This is something that not a lot of developers talk about, so it's important to remember. Okay. So now, moving right along. We've talked about laying out the website. We've talked about making it look good. Now comes interactivity, right? There's every single website pretty much has some level of interactivity, right? You can click on it, a box shows up, right? You can change a message, right? You can submit a form, right? These are all different things you can do on websites, and all of that is powered by JavaScript. So the thing that makes JavaScript so powerful is that pretty much every single browser runs JavaScript, right? So pretty much any device out there runs this one language, right? That's not necessarily true of certain languages, right? Like you have to install a bunch of stuff in order to use them, right? That's not true for JavaScript.
For example, if you do CS11 or 4, then they have installed Python. And a lot of people probably run into trouble installing Python. It's really common. Like I'm sure, like me and Nisala both have had trouble installing Python, right?
Yeah.
Same for like C++ or something. I mean, I'm a PF to do one, so I know how many people just like, I'm like the proper Roth is like, yo, clang ++, check your clang installation, things like that. The interesting thing with JavaScript is that this just exists in every browser, and the cool part is that you can also access it. So now Nisala will show it to you, but
yeah.
Go back to our old friend.
Yep, we're gonna go actually, let's do it on our website.
Yeah.
And let's open up developer tools. So again, if you're on Chrome, that's View, Developer, JavaScript console this time. And then we get this little JavaScript console. So in here, we can run different functions. So one very simple function in JavaScript is the alert function. The alert function just shows an alert. So we type in alert, and then in here, we can put a string, right? So what do we want to show, right? Let's say hi to Aadi. It's all the way on the other side of the room. Check at that. We got some interactivity, right? We got a thing that says hello Aadi, right? Yeah? Cheers. Okay. We can make it say anything we want, right? Right? Anything at all. I'll just say it.
Just start out, take a moment, send yourself an alert, click over here. Also, one interesting thing that you guys should see is because in our HTML, we removed the Santa URL to just select URL. The error message shows up here. It says, hey, there's no image. There's no image called URL. So this is also a place to like look for errors as you're going to be working forward with JavaScript more and more.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, moving right along. Yeah. And if you guys have issues, please raise your hand. Get the attention of a TA.
Yeah. After we try this out, we can maybe just show like how to like break something to the console because that's an easy one.
Yeah, sure. It's another function. Instead of alert, this time it's console.log. And check that out. Prints out in the console. It's sort of like the print function, right, in Python, or stood out, right? That sort of thing. Okay. So now that we got JavaScript, needs some new elements.
So the interesting part of JavaScript is that it is an actual programming language, right? Like HTML and CSS, we're just sort of like laying content out, saying this should be red, this should be blue, things like that. But now we have like the full power of a programming language, so similar to like C++ or Python, but like built for the web. So we can we will see how this integrates with HTML and CSS, right? Like what's the reason why like we put this stuff in the browser where like we display web pages? So we can make buttons, we can do things on click, we can make buttons do things on click. So there's like 3 in 2. And we're gonna try that out in our live demo. But the whole idea is like alerting with it. We can make a button and we can have the button alert something when clicked, right? That's interactivity, right? Like you can show the user like a success message, an error message, things like that. And the another interesting from JavaScript is that like we can modify HTML using Code. So we can write JavaScript that will modify HTML. Now let's think of the possibilities that this opens, right? Like we can do things dynamically, we can make things appear dynamically, we will see all this happen. But it's just super interesting to know all this because this sort of like moves our like fast forward into doing like much more than just writing stuff and adding some styles to it, and then simply making it move or like be interactive.
Absolutely. So we're going to move on to a live demo. We're going to show you guys how this works. So we're going to start by adding a button. So a button and any sort of input is done with the input tag. So it's a self-closing tag, so we're just going to create that like this. And now we want to give it some attributes to tell it what it is. So what type of input is this? This is a button. So we're going to say type equals button, right? And then we're going to give it a value, which is the label that it shows. So let's say this is the value, and let's say we want this button to show an alert. So let's say call it say hello, right? So it's going to show an alert. It's going to say hi or something like that. So now if we save this and refresh it, you'll see, hey, we got a say hello button here now. Of course, if we click on it, it doesn't do anything.
It does nothing because, well, we haven't really told it to do anything. So this is like the first part we talk about, just like making a button.
Yep. So now what we can do is we can give this thing one more attribute called the onClick attribute. So we're going to say onClick, and then we can put our JavaScript code in here. So we want to make it do an alert and say hi.
1 second. Before you proceed, so notice this thing that Nisala slightly did. We started off with double quotes, but inside we use single quotes.
Yep.
You will want to do that because otherwise the HTML file will get confused as to like which double quotes is close to double quotes.
See how confused it is? It's very confused. So yeah, make sure you don't mix types of quotes. So now, if we save this, we go over here, we refresh, we click on the button, it says hi. We can do that as many times as we want. It's like cookie clicker. Better. Okay, we'll give you guys a minute to set that up.
Let's do this. Make your button say anything.
Anything you want.
It can also be something different.
Yeah. Okay. Now, obviously, we can write the JavaScript in here, but like, let's say we want to do something complicated, right? Something like what you guys would do in your CS classes, right? Those functions are like 10, 20, 30 lines, right? We can't do all of that in an HTML attribute, and we don't want to, right? It's just like CSS, right? Just like you don't want 30 styles in a style attribute of an element, you don't want 30 lines of code in an HTML attribute.
I mean, imagine like, not only do they give you like fries with ketchup, but they also put memories in it, like right on top. They would never run by the office, right? Like,
Yeah, so what we want to do is we're going to create another file. And you guessed it, it's going to be called index.js for JavaScript. Incredible. And we're also going to want to link it into our file, right? Again, we need to tell the HTML file where it is. It's just like CSS. So how this works is we're going to create a script tag down here, and we're going to give it an attribute source. And the source is going to be index.js. So that tells our HTML document, hey, you got a script. It's in index.js. And generally, when you're linking scripts, you want to put them right before the close body tag, which is general rule. Okay, I'm going to split screen the JavaScript so that way we can take a look at it. Yes, absolutely. So let's write a function. So in JavaScript, writing a function is very easy. It's just the word function. It's so much easier than C++, y'all. Function, and then let's call it say hello. We're going to use, oh man, no. So we're going to call it say hello. We're going to use 2 parentheses, tell it, hey, this has no arguments. We're going to create our brackets for the function body. All right, and then we're going to write an alert and say hello. Nice and simple. That's our function.
right. So now our HTML file will be aware of this function because we included it right here.
Yes.
So instead of doing it manually, like saying alert hi in our onClick, we can pretty much just call this function.
Just say hello, just like that. So now, well, actually, let me see if I can shrink this in a way that makes sense. Okay. Now if I refresh this, click the say hello button, it says hello. Just like that. It's pulling the JavaScript from the JavaScript file and using it on the click of the button. So take a second, try this out, make sure it works. You can use a different message. You can add multiple alerts, right? So like you can have it say hello 3 times, right? You can make it log. Right? You can do whatever you want. Anything you want in your JavaScript file.
Right. So just to recap what we've done so far is that we've moved one more step forward. Now we're making buttons do something on click. So like not only is this just like the layout and styling now, but there's something happening now, like some event that was like not happening before. So right now what we're doing is basically we have a button that just says hello to the person 3 times, which is of course like the normal order of times to say hello to a person, right? And it also prints something to the console. The one interesting thing that you can do is like when you click on your button, you can go back to the DevTools console that we showed you and see if you see we or whichever text you wrote in there.
Yeah, we can actually check that out right now. So if I open up my DevTools, I'm going to refresh, click say hello, check that out. I get 3 alerts. And then if I click on console, there's my console.log. It's right there. It all shows up in here. And it also says that it took 2.7 seconds for me to get through that entire thing. It's apparently longer than it likes.
Yeah, raise your hand if you need any help with this. If something works, something doesn't work.
Raise your hand high if you guys have any issues. Otherwise, we're going to move on. All right. Okay.
So we mentioned this part as to how JavaScript is the proper programming language. It is actually not constrained to the browser. So one of the big things that happened in web development was when people figured out, hey, we can sort of like work with JavaScript outside of the browser. We don't have to have it just be that it interact with HTML and CSS. So that is why we had like Node.js, which is pretty much like a runtime or like a console for JavaScript that is not in the browser but in a separate application of its own. So we're gonna work with that in a second. And we're gonna talk about more of like JavaScript as like a programming language by itself, because that will help us do stuff in context of web development.
Yeah. So what we want you guys to do, if you guys are running Mac OS, you'll want to open Terminal. If you're running Windows, you'll want to open up Command Prompt. I'm going to open up my terminal. Actually, wait. Switch this. You should see something that looks kind of like this. Yeah. If you guys have any problems, this is harder. This is often harder, especially if you've never opened the command prompt before. Let us know. Raise your hand.
Just some context. So like once again, it's not like we're just like pairing your random stuff to do. What the terminal does is it sort of like provides you like an execution, a place to like write stuff in your own computer, like execute instructions. So like the way we were doing things in like the console, we can also do that in the safety of our own computer.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to type node in order to open up the JavaScript console in our terminal, not in a browser, but in our terminal. So it's running on our computer.
So if you have node so far, then this should work. And raise your hand if you have any problems. This doesn't work. You have an error or something happen when you try to execute node. Otherwise, we will assume that you are in the rebel. So
Yeah, raise your hand high. Raise your hand high if you're having an issue. If you typed in node and it's not showing up. Oh yeah, don't use PowerShell. Use command prompt if you're having an issue in PowerShell. Okay, if it's working, it's working. That's fine. Okay, sure. Fine with me. Okay, everyone should see a screen kind of like this. Version number might be different, but I'll give you guys a second. All right. Give these groups a couple seconds. While we're waiting, you can do all sorts of stuff in here. So obviously, there's no browser, right? So we can't run alert. There's nowhere to alert. But we can, for instance, we can still console.log. If I console.log hello, it still prints out, right? Because we got a console, we're logging to it. We can do basic math, right? Like it says in the slide, 2 plus 7, it's still 9, nothing changed. You can do all that stuff.
and why 9? Because raise 9 happens to this
Okay. Now in JavaScript, we declare variables with the keyword let. So you might remember, I mean, if you've taken Python, then you'll know you don't need a keyword at all, right? You just kind of write your variable and it just magically exists. Obviously in C++, right, you have to give it a type, so you have to go like int I equals 0. But here, all variables use the same keyword, and the keyword you use is let. So we can say let a equals 4, for instance. And if we type in a, it'll say, hey, a is 4.
So we can do math as we saw. We have variables like other programming languages. So something that's a bit different in JavaScript is that these data structures that they call objects. So objects are pretty sure they're pretty much like a key and a value. So that's just the syntax that follows. So we can just make an object.
Yeah. So this object has an attribute x, which is value is hello, and an attribute y, whose value is world. So now if we go ABC, right, it's got an attribute x, value hello, and an attribute y, with an attribute world. So if we go abc.x, it says it's hello. abc.y says it's world. This is really important. Objects are all over the place in JavaScript. This is pretty much one of the only data structures you use in JavaScript. It's very important that you understand this.
The idea is that like we will eventually to store collections of data. So this is pretty much what we will be using next. So the equivalent of this in like Python would be like a dictionary, or like in Java would be like a map. But it's pretty much the same thing. And the syntax that you just write a dot and then just the name of the property you're accessing is super unique to JavaScript. No other language really does that. It makes it like really easy to type out pretty much.
Yeah. You can also access it like a list. So I can go ABCX to get hello, or ABCY to get world. Just like you would with an array, right? Like you go array 0th element, first element. It's the exact same thing here, right? The X attribute of ABC or the Y attribute of ABC. It's the exact same concept.
So feel free to try this out. Maybe like have more variables, less variables. Make one of your properties be like a number, like maybe X instead of being hello, it's just like 3 or 5 or something.
Yeah. You can also assign attributes, so I can go like abc.z equals 3. And now ABC has that attribute. You can just create them on the fly. Once again, something that often does not exist in other languages, especially not this simply.
Yeah. So we'll give you a minute to sort of like try this stuff out, make sure this works for you, you understand what's happening. Raise your hand if you have any questions.
What's the function of the semicolon in JavaScript?
So semicolons are not technically required, but it is still generally good practice to use them, or at the very least, you've got to stick to a standard. So if you use semicolons, use them everywhere, right, to end a line, just like you would in C++ or in like Java or any of those languages. So if you use semicolons, use them everywhere, or if you don't want to use them, don't use them anywhere. They're sometimes useful for chaining multiple expressions in a row, right? Because like otherwise it just says, hey, if there's a line break, then that's a semicolon basically is what it says. So if you need to have multiple statements on one line, then you'll need a semicolon, right? So if I go like let I equals 4, let j equals 5, or something like that, you can't do that without semicolons, right? Because it's 2 different statements. Okay. Else we're going to move on. Okay. So now we're going to move on to a bit more of modern web infrastructure. So this is all good and well, but let's look to some of the big websites, right? Because right now we have a website that sure, it's got all of the building blocks, but it's pretty simple. So let's talk about what real world, some of the biggest websites that everyone uses, let's talk about how they work. And the fact of the matter is a lot of these websites are not very complicated. A lot of them do the same thing. They take a list of data from somewhere, from a server, and they show it in some form. Think about Google, for instance, right? You type in a search term, it goes to its server, like let's say I type in like cheese, right? Goes to the server server creates a list of results for cheese, sends that over, and then the website displays a list. Let's talk about social media, like Instagram or Twitter. What do? They take a list of tweets or a list of posts. They send it to your computer, and the computer displays a list. That's what pretty much all of the biggest websites on the planet do. That's all they do. Get a list of data, and then show a list. It's literally it. Now, we can currently do that with the technology we have. Let's say we did that with Twitter, right? So let's say I type in a search bar on Twitter. Okay? So JavaScript makes a web request to Twitter servers and says, hey, let's say I type in cheese, right? Say, okay, give me make a web request and say, hey, Twitter, list of tweets, the word cheese, right? And it gets the data, and we have to write a loop, right? I'm sure all of you guys, if you've been in a CS class, how to write a loop, right? So it's very similar to JavaScript. Right? We write a loop to loop through every single one of those results for cheese, and then we create that little tweet card, right? Like the thing with the person's profile picture and their username, and the tweet, and then maybe an image if they have one, right? And so we craft that diff, and we loop through every single tweet, we create that list, and then we inject them onto the website. Right. Which is something we can do with JavaScript. So
you know what I mentioned that like we can create HTML with JavaScript. Now imagine how cumbersome this process would be if you like have a big list of tweets and you're like manually one by one making the same HTML, same CSS, same JavaScript with each one, right? Like every tweet card like looks a certain way, like directly like this blue bar, the little bulb icon or something, and then like the like button, retweet button, all of that. So like you have interactivity, style, HTML, all of those going on with like exactly identically multiple times, right? Like all your feed is pretty much the same thing repeated over and over with different data. So surely there has to be a better way to do that, right? Like,
yeah. And it gets even more complicated, right? So like if I try to search something else, then I have to go in JavaScript and go in that same loop and I have to delete every single div I made, and then I have to remake them all over again with this new list. And if there's a similar, if like the same tweet shows up in both searches, that's really hard to figure out, right? Because then I have to like, if it's in a different place, right, then I have to shift it up, right? And I have to move it differently if I didn't want to remake it. Oftentimes you just end up remaking it. And what if there's a new tweet, right? Like, let's say a new tweet comes in while I'm in the search. Right now, Twitter will automatically take that tweet and just show it to you, right? It'll just pop into the top if you've ever used Twitter. That's really hard for us to do, right? You'd have to break down and recreate the entire view. The process is slow. It's prone to error. It's difficult to optimize. It's difficult to do. And this is where modern web tools come in. We're going to learn about React. Now, how many of you guys have heard of React before? Anyone? It's okay if you guys haven't. Okay, that's awesome. So React is super cool because React is for these biggest websites. It's for taking lists and rendering them in different ways, or taking data and using the data to create the website. So you can just give React a list. You give it a list of tweets, list of search results, list of products like on Amazon, and tell it to just render a website using that list.
so we can talk about some context here, right? We just like said React, but like what exactly is React? Who made this? How does it even work? So React is a framework it's written in JavaScript we just worked with. That was written at Facebook. See, the way they got about Twitter and all of the problems with the feed, Facebook had exactly the same problems, and they needed a way to figure out a way to do that in a much better manner. So they made this framework internally called React, which is open source, so everyone else can also use it at this point. So the whole idea of having a framework is to sort of like not do the tasks manually that we have been doing, right? So from as we work with React, we will not be writing as much HTML and CSS and stuff by hand, and we'll be working more with the tools that they give us. So it's like if we were making cupcakes, we just got like a brand new machine to make it for us.
Absolutely. So a couple more cool features of React. As the list changes, the website will automatically react to the changes in the list and update your website accordingly. That's really cool, right? No extra code required. If the list changes, your website changes. Just like that. It's like magic. And list items can also be turned into these things called components, which we'll talk about more about next week. But the idea with a component is it's a little snippet of HTML that React can reuse over and over and over. The idea is that like if you have a Twitter card, right, that can be a component. And then you can say, hey, use that card for every single tweet in the list and plug in all the data and throw it on the website. That's it. That's a Twitter feed. That's the whole thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using React for a to-do list. Because think about it, a to-do list is a list of items, of things to do, and every single one has a different card. It has a different place on the website, right? And as we create to-do list items, we want them to show up. As we complete them, we want them to disappear. It's the exact same thing, right? So we're going to be using React over the next couple weeks in order to create this to-do list application with the skills we've learned in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So creating a React app is really easy, but you do have to do it in the command line. It's just one command.
It's also easy, so we can explain the different words that are written over there and like sort of like give an idea of like what it handles this to.
Yeah.
So,
Real quick though, before we do that, if you're stuck in the Node.js terminal, to get out, it's Control-D, which sends end of file or end of input, which tells it, hey, I'm done typing here, get me out. So Control-D will get you out.
So when we start Node, we also start a bunch of stuff to sort of like help us with Node. This is something that we don't really cover in like CS 201 or 11.4 or something. It's like how to like get some like different libraries or stuff to help you, right? Like all of the code that we use is probably provided to professors and stuff, or like it's pre-built.
Yep.
So NPM Node comes with this tool called NPM, which we will work with at a later point. That helps us install packages from the web provided by other people. But it also has this tool called npx that lets us run run packages that other people have provided. So this create React app package is pretty much provided by the people who made React. So we will be using that, and then to-do list is just the name of the application that we will be making. So like where we place this.
Yep.
So the thing we want to do before we run this application is to make sure we're in like the folder that we want to sort of like make a React app in.
Yes. So I have a projects folder that I normally make all this stuff in. So I'm going to go in there. So in order to go into a folder, we use CD, which stands for change directory, right? So I say CD, I want to go into projects. And now if you're on Mac, ls, or on Windows dir, dir, will list the files in a directory. So if I run ls, here are all of my projects. So I'm going to actually, I don't know if there's a to-do list already, but that was scary. Why did that take so long? Okay, we're not going to worry about that. So what we want to do now is we want to create our to-do list, right? Let me make sure that it doesn't exist. Okay, it does. It's a bit of a problem. You know what? I'm just going to get rid of it. I don't know what it is, but it's going away now. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the to-do list, right? So all you have to do is run this command, npx create React app to-do list. When you hit enter, it's going to say, hey, creating a new React app. It says it'll take a couple minutes. Hopefully the Wi-Fi is good enough that it won't take a couple minutes. Raise your hand if you run into any issues here. If it says npx command not found, if you have any issues, let us know.
For me, it just says like need to install the packages and then it like says okay.
Yeah, if it says OK to proceed, type in a Y and hit enter to proceed. I've already created a React app, so it did not ask me. Whee! It's going. All right. So now what we want to do is we want to actually activate this new app. So they've created a full website for us. So all we're going to do is we're going to go in and we're going to check it out. So again, we want to go into the to-do list folder that it's created for us. So we go CD to-do list. Yeah, just like it says right here. So CD to-do list, and then we're going to activate, we're going to start it. So we're going to use another node software called npm. We're going to do npm start in order to start the web server. We're going to run npm start. It's going to show some stuff, and then it should automatically pop up in your browser, and you should see something like this.
Okay. Raise your hand if this doesn't happen, if something else happens, the command npm start doesn't work as it should it's supposed to work. So you can see that like the instructions it gives us like edit src after.js is pretty much just like a JavaScript file, like the one we just worked with.
Yep. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move our code over to React, the website that we wrote before. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up VS Code. We're going to go File, Open Folder, because now we're going to open this new folder that we just made, right? So we're going to go over to Projects. In my case, I'm going to click on To-Do List, and I'm going to click Open. And check it out. We got this whole project that they've made. If you go into, remember they told us to go to src app.js. So let's go over there and let's see what they got.
Well, so interestingly, if you were to see this, they say it's a JS file, but this code looks like really familiar. I feel like they just did something like this like maybe like 30 minutes, 45 minutes ago. It's just HTML.
Yeah. So yeah, React is really cool in that you can write HTML directly in your JavaScript files, right? So you can basically tell it, hey, like this is my HTML, and this is what I want you to inject into my website. So what I want you guys to do now is move some of your HTML over, right? So you'll want to delete all of this stuff, so that way it just says, yeah, you can delete all of this. So that way it's just a div. And see, look at that, we're back to our blank HTML site. And we can stick a paragraph in. There we go, we got a paragraph now. Looking exactly the same.
And we can pretty much move all our HTML over
Yeah.
to this part. Because it keeps like divs, so React sort of like knows the parts of it's working with.
All right. So now what we're going to do, now that we've moved our code over, is we need a way to store our code. And what professionals use is they use something called Git. And Git is a way to manage versions of your code. So have you ever, when you're working on something, right? Have you ever like saved the file with one name, you duplicate it, you save it under another name, like you like store backups of your files? right? I feel like everyone's done that with research papers, right? You got that like thing in your downloads that says like paper final version, right? Like everyone's done that.
Or is it bracket 1?
Yep, that's happened to everyone, right? Git is how you avoid that. It stores the versions with your project. And Git is something that we asked you guys to install. Hopefully all of you guys have it. And it's what we're going to be using to manage this. Now, React already sets this up for us. So it's very simple. When you're in a good place, like right now, right, we have our app, we moved our stuff over. You add your file. So we'll go git app, add app.js, and then you commit your files. You say, you're literally committing. You're saying like, hey, I've got all my files. I'm at a place I'm happy with. This is where I'm at.
So it's like saving a snapshot, and these commands do in a terminal. So when we do git add, then they're basically saying, okay, so like these are the files that you want to save right now, right? Because you may have multiple files, you don't really want to like save some, you still have like 2 drafts or something, but it's like, okay, this one question I'm like super satisfied with, so I just have it in a document, and I'm gonna save it right now. So we do git add.
Yeah. So to get out of here, first of all, Control C to get out.
Right.
Yeah.
Like quick thing. Control C is sort of like stop this process. So we do that with like Control C. But before, when we were in like Node, we had used Control D, which means end of input. So just like 2 different shortcuts, so you know.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to add this file. I'm going to say, hey, I want that file, right? The changes I made, I want those to be tracked, and then I'm going to commit them. I'm going to say git commit -m, and then my message is, all right, got a basic React app. That's going off the page. It says, okay, I've committed it.
And now we can sort of look at the stuff. So there's like 2 nice commands that we will use. The first one we can do is like git status. This is a lifesaver. It just shows you anything that like, if anything changes, if something is just added but not committed, you will see it in git status. So this is just like a good command to just like use when you're not sure what's happening.
Right.
The other one is git log, which just shows you the commits you've made, the things you've saved. So you can see here, and it's 5 minutes over our time, we finally are done, and we just made a commit, and just like this is the stuff we've had so far.
All right. We're going to start moving towards the last step now, which is to move this code into GitHub. Now, GitHub is a place that stores all of your code as you work on it. So right now, we've got our code on our computer, but let's say we want other people to work on it with us, right? That's what GitHub is for. It's for people to be able to see your code, and then if they want to collaborate on it, to help you with it, to add features. That's what GitHub is all about. So what we're going to do is we're going to push our changes to GitHub. Now, I know a lot of you guys are new to GitHub. Hopefully you guys made an account since we asked you to. If you did, you should be able to follow these steps. So what we want to do in order to get our code into the cloud is first we want to get a token. So we can go to this link, and it'll tell us to generate a new token. So /token, yep. Yeah, sorry, let me make that more clear over here. Yeah, and then we can say, okay, this is for my computer, right? We're going to tell it to never expire. We can give it access to repositories. Something like this, and then at the bottom, click generate token, and then it'll give you a little token. So this token will basically be like your password. So whenever Git asks you for your password, this is what you'll put in. You'll put in this token. If you guys already have this set up, Git push already works for your GitHub account, then you guys don't have to do this. But everyone else, go here, create a token, give it access to repo, and then click generate token at the bottom. Go to this link here, github.com/settings/tokens. Right here.
What do we have to do if we have that set up? Do we have to do the next part with git config?
Well, okay, so git config sets up your computer to remember the token the first time you type it in. If you already have it set up, you don't need that line.
Should we do the part after that?
Yes, you'll have to do the 3rd and the 4th lines. So fork that repository, and then follow the instructions it gives you, which we'll talk about.
So what forking does is it basically starts off with a repository and makes your own copy of it. Just like a fork.
So I'm going to go ahead here. I'm going to click generate token. So give me this token. I'm going to click the copy button to copy it. And I'm just going to hide it away somewhere over here. I'm just going to put it in my URL bar. And then I'm going to go into my terminal. And I'm going to run this line. Git config -- global credential.helper store. And that basically tells Git the next time I type in a token, which we'll be typing in that token very soon. The next time I type it in, remember it. I'll tell it to store it somewhere. So I'll run that line. Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to fit everything on the screen here. So next what we want to do, right, is we want to go to this link, this GitHub link, and, oh, cannot fork because repository is empty. Hey, we got a problem. That's a bit of an issue. If we put a README in it, though, okay, you know what? This is what's going to be necessary then. Yeah, already teaching great practices here. Oh, oops, my bad, sorry. Okay, one sec. Oh, perfect, okay. Yeah, so everyone, now click the fork button up here. Click fork, and then select your user account in order to fork the workshop, this repository, this piece of code in the cloud, over to your account. So I'm going to click on my name here. It's going to start forking. Should take a second. Ugh, and now it doesn't give the intro code. This is the issue. So as you guys are finishing up, what you guys will want to do is you guys will want to run one more command. Git remote add origin. And that's to tell Git where we want to put our code, right? So we're going to go git remote add origin. And then over here on our forked repository, we're going to click on code. And then we're going to click this copy button. So this is a link to where our code is in the cloud. So we can copy that, paste this in here, and that adds it. So now Git says, hey, this is where I'm putting my code. And then if I push, oh wait, okay, it tells me to run one more line. Let's run that. Okay, should be this then, actually. There we go, okay. This is the line you need to run. Let me actually put that in the slideshow so everyone can see it.
So it's like two interesting things made by the same person. Kind of odd. Yeah, and he called it data politics.
Okay. You guys will see that once we pushed, when you refresh in here, there's all of our code. It's our create React code. It'll show up in GitHub. So that's all we have for today. So once you guys are done, you guys are free to leave. But if it's not working, please raise your hand. Let us know. We can help you out.
Yeah. Next week we start from this point. We're going to work with React much more.
Please don't leave if it's not working.
Yeah.
We'll continue.
All right, cool. That was the workshop. Thank you guys so much for watching. And before we leave, there are two really important links that I want to leave you guys with. The first one here is going to be vhl.inc/takehomes. And if I actually go to that link here, cool. It's going to redirect me directly to the GitHub VH Mentorship organization. And here we have three different take-homes that we've kind of made for you guys. And the first one is going to be practicing HTML and CSS. It's going to be creating like a Vandy Hacks homepage clone. And the second one is going to be a basic counter, and this is going to practice JavaScript. And this one I really, really like because it's actually a very, popular problem. I've actually seen it before on front-end development take-home challenges for internship roles. It's a very, very popular, very, very classic question. And then the third one is going to be a Google homepage clone. And this is going to be, you're definitely going to have to look up some things. And the goal of this is to give in some HTML to style it as close as possible to the Google homepage. And the person that's closest will actually win one of these really good VH tumblers. And you'll notice this time that the Vandy Hex logo is not upside down. So yeah, strongly recommend. Good times. All right. So those are the 3 take-homes that we made for you guys. And I really want to reiterate once again that, you know, these workshops are really, you know, you get as much as you put into them. Especially with things like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, we can really only teach you so much in an hour and a half. And honestly, 80% of it is going to be practice. So we provided you these really great opportunities. If you want to practice with your own sort of take-homes, with your own challenges, absolutely feel free. These are just, you know, some ones that we made for you in terms of, you know, some really important skills to practice, especially with web development. You know, we have 2 weeks apart from each other before we move on to React, which is going to be really exciting. It's a really great framework, and we're going to learn some of the powerful capabilities of it and be able to create some really cool websites. But before we can do that, it's really important to build a foundation for yourself. So I strongly recommend that you try out these take-homes. All right. And then the second link that I'm going to share with you guys is bhl.inc/feedback. And if you actually go to this link, it'll take you to a Google form that will provide feedback to the content committee. You know, these workshops are exclusively for you guys. They're exclusively for the mentorship program. And for that reason, you know, we want to make sure that they're the best experience for you. We want to make sure that you guys are having fun. We want to make sure that you guys are understanding things. We want to make sure that you guys are as engaged as possible. Once again, one person will win a cool VH tumbler. So definitely make sure that you fill out that feedback form so that we can learn how to improve, and we can learn to make sure that this experience is the best for you guys. So with that in mind, you know, we have 2 weeks until our second workshop on March 22nd. And until then, definitely try out those take-homes. Definitely, you know, keep coding in your own time. And if you have questions, there are so many resources to reach out to. There's the VH Content Committee. There's the Discord channel of VH Workshop questions, as well as there's your pod leaders who would absolutely be willing to help you. So yeah, really excited to learn React on our next workshop. And until then, keep practicing, and we can't wait to see you next time.